Okay, as it is 2 o'clock, I will start talking. Hello, everyone. I'm really delighted to see you all here for the Demonstrating Organisational Impact in Archives event. I'm going to quickly run through a few housekeeping bits and tell you what's happening today. And in the meantime, as I've been saying to people arriving, please do feel free to introduce yourselves into the chat. It's a really nice way to get the conversation going and keep things a bit interactive. So I first wanted to just note a tweak to the agenda. Given the heat we're having today, we will have a brief comfort break just before the Q&A, because I know that it's not that pleasant to sit in this weather for so long. So this session will feature 3 talks and 2 randomly assigned breakout rooms, with the aim of hopefully replicating some of those benefits of in-person events where you meet new people and catch up with old friends. These rooms won't be facilitated as there's quite a lot of people, so feel free to discuss the talks that you've just heard, have a general catch up. We're not facilitating, talk about what you wish, but I will also put a question in the chat before each room. So if you want to have a conversation around those topics, then that's a really good way to break the ice. You should have all been muted on arrival, and if you could keep your mics on mute during the talks, that would be really useful to limit ambient noise. But if you are in a breakout room and you're comfortable, please feel free to turn your mic and cameras on and have a conversation. We are going to be recording the session, but not the breakout rooms for hopefully obvious reasons. Live captioning is available if you click the closed caption button on the menu. Please use the chat for any comments and questions throughout the session. We will be taking questions for a brief Q&A at the end, chaired by my wonderful colleague, Catherine Preston. And speaking of colleagues, Catherine and Mike Rogers are also on the line. So if you need any help with anything, pop something in the chat and they will pick that up. So we're going to be discussing impact in all its forms, and you've all probably seen the agenda and know what you signed up for. So without further ado, I will hand over to our first speaker, who is Philippa Mole, who's Head of Archive at Guardian News and Media. I will stop sharing.
Hi, I'm just going to hopefully start sharing. I'm hoping people can now see my first slide.
Yeah, looking good.
Perfect. So hi everyone, I'm Philippa, one of 2 archivists at the Guardian News and Media Archive. It's really lovely to be able to talk to you today. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the session this afternoon as well. I've got 15 minutes to have a look at how we demonstrate impact at the G&M archive. I'm going to start by giving you just some brief background information about the archive and its collections, and then have a quick look at who our parent organisations are and what kind of impact they're looking to make. I'll then try and run through some of the ways that we fit the archive into those aims, and I'll finish up with a very, very brief case study around the Guardian's bicentenary celebrations, which have been our main focus for 2021 so far. So, the Guardian News and Media Archive, or G&M Archive for short, is the current repository for the archives of the Guardian and Observer newspapers, and of related people and organisations. Our collections don't include back copies of the paper themselves. Those are looked after by the Guardian's library team and of course by the British Library. This slide is just to give you a very broad idea of the kind of history that we're charged with preserving. As mentioned, the Guardian turned 200 earlier this year, and the Observer is even older. It's actually the world's oldest Sunday newspaper. They were completely separate entities until 1993, when the Guardian Media Group bought the Observer. The key date for us on this slide is 1959. Until this point, the Guardian was known as the Manchester Guardian and was based in Manchester. The name change was the first step in a 5-year move south to London. And that's important for us because that shift also marks the starting point for most of our collections. The majority of records from the Manchester years are held in Manchester at the university there. And with a few exceptions, our collections date from the 1960s onwards. Because it was completely separate until 1993, we don't have early records for the Observer either. So the vast majority of our collections are recent. Another reason that our collections are recent is that the archive itself is recent. It only opened in 2002, and a lot of effort was made in the early years to try and find records stored in different parts of the business and in the homes of ex-colleagues and so on. They also ran an oral history project to try and fill some of the gaps. This building in the picture is where the archive was first set up in 2002. It's always had a public reading room, and after a 10-year closure period, our records are open to researchers of all kinds, including academics, students, family historians, novelists, interested members of the public, really anyone. In 2008, we moved into the Guardian's new headquarters at King's Place near King's Cross, and pandemics aside, our collections are still based there today. We do sit slightly apart from the business though, as the archive is owned by the Guardian Foundation, which is an independent charity. Over the last 5 years, the charity has grown and formed its own management structure and mission statement. A little bit more on that later. I wanted to give you a really quick run through of the types of records that we hold so that you have a sense of the collections. The majority of the archive is still made up of paper documents, including these old staff magazines. We also hold a lot of photographs dating from the 1920s onwards. We have a whole second storeroom for these. We collect original artwork from illustrators and cartoonists who've worked for the papers. This one is a piece by Les Gibbard from 1970. And because there's no Guardian Museum, we've also ended up with a small and fairly random collection of objects. This one here is a circuit board from a computer which was destroyed in 2013 at the demand of the British government because it had been used to process confidential NSA and GCHQ data leaked to the Guardian by Edward Snowden. And then we also hold digital records, including both digitized and born digital material. So that's who we are and what we collect, but who's our parent organisation and what kind of impact do they want us and our collections to have? And the purpose of this slide is really just to show that for us, that's not a straightforward question. So this is us, the Guardian and News and Media Archive. As mentioned, our collections are owned by the Guardian Foundation and we sit under their management structure. So I report to the executive director of the charity, who reports to the foundation's board. And then in turn, the foundation reports to the Scott Trust, which is an independent body that exists to secure the financial and editorial independence of the Guardian in perpetuity. So far, so good, but then we have the Guardian Media Group, Guardian News and Media, and of course the Observer and the Guardian. And these are all connected as well. So GMG is owned by the Scott Trust, which is also its only shareholder. In turn, GMG owns GNM, which controls the newspapers. To make things even more complicated, the foundation gets the majority of its funding from GMG and the majority of its in-kind resources from GNM, which is also the employer for its staff, including the archivist. We take in records from every one of these entities. They all have distinct but connected aims and strategies, and they're all stakeholders in our service. So yes, it's complicated. But the two of these that we tend to view as our parent organisations are the Guardian Foundation and GNM, the charity we report to, and our employer, whose records make up the majority of our collections. I borrowed this slide from a Guardian Foundation presentation about the charity's purpose. As you can probably gather by looking at it, looking after the archive is not the charity's sole or even its most important role. It also runs 2 education programs for schools, school-aged children, manages competitions and bursaries for UK journalists from underrepresented backgrounds, and works to support and train journalists overseas who are working in difficult circumstances that threaten free and independent journalism. This is another borrowed slide, this time from GNM's current strategy. As you can see, the strategy is all about breadth and depth. The breadth and depth of the company's relationships with the people who read The Guardian and The Observer, and about making sure that everything the company does is guided by an overarching purpose, which is up there in yellow. It's using clarity and imagination to build hope. So how do these two sets of aims fit together, and where does the archive fit in? Fortunately, and by design, there's a lot of overlap between the aims and values of the two organisations, and we've been able to let the impact they want to make shape the way we run our service without too much difficulty. Firstly, as mentioned, we have a focus on openness in our access policy. Our reading room, which you can see here, is open to the public by appointment in non-COVID times. Our catalogue is freely available online. We don't ask for letters of recommendation or any academic affiliation. And where possible, all our records are opened up for research 10 years after creation. We also answer about 500 inquiries from members of the public each year, remotely, usually by email, but also over the phone. Being able to welcome Guardian and Observer readers into the paper's headquarters to carry out their research or answering their inquiries remotely fits in well with GNM's aim to deepen its reader relationships. Bearing in mind that the Guardian is part of the influential mainstream media, both in the UK and globally, making its records accessible to researchers also fits in well with the Foundation's aim to make sure that all people can access the truth and hold power to account. And we report to the board about the number of on-site and remote researchers that we've worked with every quarter. We also work to make highlights from our collections accessible online, both by publishing articles and photo galleries of our own and through collaborations with editorial colleagues using archive content, usually material from our picture libraries. We have access to the Guardian's audience tools, and you can see that in motion here, which tell us how many readers have engaged with our content and whether they're frequent users of the Guardian website or not, and which allows us to see and report on our very, very modest contribution to GNM's aim around audience growth and reader relationships. One target group for our online resources is young people, and especially school-aged children. For the last decade, we have been working with the Foundation's Education Centre to produce resources that can be used by teachers in the classroom, in media studies, English, history, and primary lessons. Recently, we've extended our efforts towards the Foundation's aim to engage children and young people with the news by running a Heritage Fund supported project to deliver archive workshops in partnership with the Education Centre. And piloted in person and then delivered virtually over the last 6 months, these workshops focus on giving young people an understanding of how journalism works in the pre-digital age and how it's changed over time. The Foundation draws on expertise and volunteer time from GNM colleagues to meet its aims, involving staff members in school programmes, international training courses, and shortlisting for bursaries and competitions. In the archive team, we help to raise the profile of the Foundation and encourage staff engagement by spending time on a range of internal outreach activities. And you can see a few examples here on the slide. So we do induction sessions with all new colleagues when they join the Guardian and the Observer. And we show them a few objects from the archive and give them the chance to handle some material. In 2019, we did a film screening of a film from the 1950s showing a typical day at the Guardian at that point, with some hilarious overacting in it. We also work with staff volunteers who spend their lunch breaks with us, helping us to sort through our photo collections. And in 2019, we ran a volunteering drop-in, which you can see here. We do tours both of the stores and collections and of the office and all of the heritage material on display in it. And at the end of our week of outreach in 2019, we had a lunchtime spent trying to piece together a hot metal front page that had fallen apart in transit. So the very metallic and slightly smelly puzzle. So it was really fun to get involved in and really engage people. Because the Guardian's purpose and values are so caught up in its long history, every incoming editor-in-chief is just told to carry on as heretofore. Engaging colleagues with the collections and the stories that we look after in a really important way does help GNM's aim of building a more purposeful organisation. Occasionally we'll carry out outreach activities that tie in clearly with GNM's business aims rather than the aims of the Foundation. In recent years, for example, we have run tours of the archive stores for paying Guardian members and private tours for potential new patrons, with the clear aim of helping GNM build greater value from its audience relationships. These have always been really well received, both by the visitors and by the business, and it's always a pleasure to share the collections with new people. But we do try to limit the amount of time that this type of activity takes away from our core work. And finally, sitting within a charity that aims explicitly to promote diversity in the news media, we do look for narratives in the archive that support that work. For example, we have delved into our oral history, personal papers and business collections to highlight the careers of 15 pioneering female journalists in our online resources, This focus also colours the way we approach our own work. For example, we partnered with MenCap between 2016 and 2018 to host work experience placements for 2 of their clients with learning disabilities and to employ another on an 8-month contract. The impact of this kind of initiative beyond our own services is quite hard to measure, but I did feel that enabling these colleagues to have a presence in the building and to attend open editorial meetings and so on, as well as working with HR to adapt standard procedures to suit them, did make a subtle contribution to the Foundation's aims around promoting diversity in the news media. And finally, we have been making a special effort recently to make sure that we are capturing both inspiring and difficult stories around diversity in the media through a new oral history project, which I'll mention again in a moment. So we looked at the archive, its parent organisations and the impact we tried to have for them. I want to use my last couple of minutes to talk quickly about our recent contribution to a distinct project with its own aims and planned impact, the Guardian's bicentenary celebrations earlier this year. This is another borrowed slide, and the graph might be a little bit too small for you to see clearly, but it lays out some of the aims of the bicentenary project, which was led by GNM's editorial and communication teams. The key bits for us are that the project was intended to remind people who we are and where we have come from, and that the history and impact pillars are all about resurfacing and highlighting the paper's stories in journalism from over the last 200 years. And clearly there's a lot an archive team can do to contribute to aims like these, and I was pleased to be included in the project planning committee from the beginning. But I have already mentioned 2 major limitations to our collections that have an impact here, namely that we don't look after back copies of the paper or past articles, and that we don't hold many records related to the Guardian's early history. And then of course there was the unexpected addition of a 3rd challenge, given that we entered the bicentenary period still working remotely from home and without regular access to the collections. Fortunately, we did find that the knowledge and relationships we built up cumulatively over nearly 20 years of running the archive service put us in a really good position. As is so often the case, the business didn't actually want access to original records or the opportunity to do really in-depth research. They wanted ready processed information. And so we worked together with our colleagues in the Guardian's library, or officially Research and Information team, whose desk you can see on the left here, and with the archivists at the John Rylands Library, which you can see on the right, as well as drawing on the many, many notes and resources that our team has created over the years to provide the information that was needed. One major aspect of this work was the work that we did to populate the new 6-strand timeline published on the Guardian's 200th birthday in May. The different strands highlighted areas in which the Guardian is keen to demonstrate its impact, including the history of women and the history of environmentalism. We worked with a librarian and with advice from the archivist at the John Rylands Library to populate the mammoth spreadsheet that you can see on the right, which was then magically turned into a really neat interactive timeline by colleagues in editorial and design. We were able to supply oral history clips and digitized artworks and photographs from the collections to be included directly as well, which is really great. Another part of the bicentenary project that we were heavily involved in was exhibitions. So the Guardian doesn't have its own exhibition space anymore. So we were able to contribute by working with external organisations that the Guardian didn't otherwise have very strong relationships all the time. So on the left, you can see the exhibition currently running at the Picture Library, which I think is open until late September, which draws entirely on our photographic collection. So it's a display of images that have come from the Guardian's picture libraries going back to about the 1920s and up to about 2000 when the switch was made to digital photographs. And on the right, you can see the John Rylands Research Institute and Libraries exhibition about the Manchester Guardian, which focuses mostly on their own collections from the early years of the Manchester Guardian, but also includes some loaned content from us, and we were able to help with captions and some of the planning for that project. Both exhibitions, I think, are a really good example of showing the impact of the Guardian over time. The Picture Library exhibition looks at some of the themes that you might expect to find in the Guardian's Picture Library around protests and freedom of speech, etc. And the Manchester Guardian exhibition is themed around a lot of the types of impact that The Guardian likes to talk about when it talks about itself. And then the last thing that we've been doing that's taken up a lot of our time this year is trying to make sure that when the next bicentenary rolls round, the teams that are around at that point have all the resources that they need to do the same job and perhaps do it a bit better. We have run a series of oral histories with a selection of colleagues across the business to try and capture the moment. So during the Bicentenary project, people were quite often asking, what did we do when we were 100? What were things like then? How has it changed? And the aim of the first strand of our oral history project was to try and answer that question for people down the line. So what is The Guardian like in 2021? What are people's roles about? What are they thinking about? What's it been like for them working remotely during the pandemic this year? The second strand was aimed to fill a gap that we identified during our bicentenary research. We realised that we weren't able to name the first person of colour to work for The Guardian, and we couldn't really say a lot about the history of early people of colour in the organisation. And we have done a targeted oral history project speaking to journalists of colour who started work at The Guardian more than 10 years ago and are able to talk about what things were like when they joined and how things have changed. They've both been really, really valuable records to collect, and I think will be really useful when The Guardian wants to look back on itself in the future. So overall, I think the bicentenary was a great opportunity for us to demonstrate the impact that The Guardian has had over the last 200 years, and in doing so to work with a raft of new colleagues and to demonstrate our own value to the business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philippa. I thought that was really interesting. What a range of activities. I feel like I've got a lot to think about. So we'll now head to our second speaker, who is Stephanie Neild, the archivist at Leonard Cheshire.
Thanks, Georgie. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be talking to you this afternoon. I hope you're all keeping cool. As you already know from the introduction, I'm Stephanie and I'm the archivist for international disability charity Leonard Cheshire. I won't be showing you a PowerPoint presentation today, but I will be showing a film at the end, which Georgie kindly will share for us. Leonard Cheshire, as I said before, is a disability charity based in the UK, but our work is actually international, and we support disabled people to live, learn and work as independently as they choose and whatever their ability. This is done in a variety of ways. We support disabled people to claim their rights, to access quality learning and work, and to live as they choose. From this introduction, it should be obvious that I'm an archivist in a non-heritage workplace. The business plan and goals of the Archives parent organisation are not heritage ones, but it's always at the back of my mind that the work we do should align with our goals where they can. However, I am a lone worker with a very small team of volunteers. The archive is based in South Derbyshire in a purpose-built, cliently controlled, strong room and archive centre built by the trustees in 2005, and I have a very small team of volunteers. The charity has had an archive or an archivist pretty much from the beginning of its inception in 1948, and the charity is 73 years old today. Well, not today, sorry, it was 73 years old in May. So we have a lot of history that we keep here about our charity's work, and also our founder, Group Captain Leonard Cheshire VC. As I said before, the archive is based in South Derbyshire next to a Leonard Cheshire home, and it's far away from the head office in London, of which I'm technically a part. All of this makes influencing and making an impact a challenge. I definitely need to be pragmatic and use my energy and resources strategically to make any impact effectively. There are areas where it is a struggle to create impact and also to measure it. Staff turnover can mean there are times where I feel like a broken record saying the same thing repeatedly, which can be quite demoralising. In some of our care home services, there is the opposite. Staff who have worked for the charity for 10 or 20 years, they're so busy and for the main part not computer-based, so it is difficult to make impact on them too. There will be some people working in the care home across the car park who do not know we exist or what we do, especially now access to care homes is so restricted due to lockdown measures. However, it's not all doom and gloom. Where I have found success is in creating and demonstrating impact through fundraising for project work. Since I began work at Leonard Cheshire, we have had 2 Heritage Lottery grants for archive outreach projects. The first, Rewind, was a large-scale digitisation and workshop project where engagement took place in 6 Leonard Cheshire care homes in the southeast of England. It ended with an exhibition in London's Oxo Tower and was very high profile within our organisation. But that level of awareness is hard to maintain without project funding, and as time went by and the organisation evolved, that awareness dropped again. However, applying for and getting the funding for our second Resonate project, a sound digitisation project and digital volunteering opportunity, that has improved that awareness again, and I'm starting to see that having impact isn't a linear path or a constant upward trajectory, but rather something that needs to be revisited as your organisation changes through time. Getting external funding for archive projects has been an effective way of meeting the charity's objectives and getting the archive in front of key decision makers, the management board and trustees. One of the aims of charities is to fundraise, and the funders of archive projects are often different to the types of funder that a non-heritage organisation cultivates. So from that point of view, the archive is an asset to furthering an organisation's fundraising income and impact. This project work has also left us with valuable resources, digitised content and project films that can be used on social media and to support campaigns and show to key decision makers as part of their induction to the charity. I always think the best way to show impact is through somebody else's words, and we've done this with our projects by ensuring an engaging film is made of the work we've been doing, talking to those involved and getting their thoughts and emotions on film. You'll be watching it a little bit later, and we have shared that film externally and internally. As I just said, I'm going to show you a film from our second Heritage Lottery funded project Resonate, which does a good job of showing the impact volunteering with Leonard Cheshire has had on the individuals involved and the way our heritage supports the aims of the charity today. This all feeds into raising awareness of Leonard Cheshire and its aims, including building awareness of our work in previously unreached audiences. Without these projects, I believe there wouldn't have been the organisational knowledge of what the archive could achieve, both from a fundraising perspective, but also as a way of raising awareness with staff, supporters and service users and clients. Our second project, Resonate, being held during a pandemic, whilst a challenge, was also useful for both staff and participants to feel part of something bigger, especially when we're all working from home. I've received feedback from both staff, participants and volunteers on how our project outputs have helped them to cope with feelings of isolation, an unexpected but very rewarding outcome. I think the best way to find out more about the impact that this work has had on them is to watch our film. So Georgie, if you could play our film and we'll watch it together. Thank you.
The Resonate project is a 18-month digitisation and volunteer project. The main project is to transcribe and digitise the sound collection that we have here, which features over about 256 tapes. Hi, I'm Michael Ruddy. I work as the Resonate project officer.
My name is Lily and my role within the Resonate project is as a digital volunteer.
Hi, I'm Laura Crawford. I was one of the volunteers in the Resonate project.
My name's Sue. I'm a volunteer at the archive.
My name's Stephanie. I'm the archivist for Leonard Cheshire. I'm managing the Resonate project, which is digitising our historic sound collection. Our sound collection is around 50 years old and is a collection of old reel-to-reel tapes, cassettes and CDs. Leonard, towards the end of his life, was very concerned with making sure that there was a repository of information, and he was very concerned with remembering the people that had helped him along the way. And in order to save those contents, we needed to get them digitised. So it's enabled us to save these tapes that he'd kept for so long and we've kept for so long, and actually save their contents for the future.
But of course, with 24 disabled people in the house, you can imagine that we were in to put it mildly, a muddle, because I had no idea how to run a house.
I think focusing specifically on Resonate, to hear Leonard's voice and to hear his speeches just brought everything to life so much more. I had a sense of who he was as a person from doing my PhD, that he was a charismatic person, but it wasn't until I'd heard some of his speeches during this project that you got a real sense of how he did manage to win people around and get them invested in what he was trying to do with the Cheshire Homes and with the charity more broadly. And I thought it was really fundamental that these kind of resources were saved, as they're so crucial to the history of the disability rights movement and about Leonard Cheshire, the person himself.
So I called on the district nurse and she said, "Oh, it's perfectly simple. I'll show you what to do." And so she gave me what she called a concentrated course of nursing in 3 evenings.
I've learned that Leonard is very committed. He doesn't let a lot get in his way, especially funding. It really doesn't seem to faze him. If he doesn't even have a single penny, he's quite determined that I'm going to open this house and I can get people on board. It's not an issue. I can, get the funding. People will jump on board. And quite clearly they did.
It's been really interesting just to see what we've got, because remember, before this project started, we knew we had 257 recordings, but we didn't actually know what was on there.
There was one transcription that I did, which was with a volunteer who was involved in setting up one of the first homes in Cornwall. At that moment in time, the charity didn't have this big presence, so she was just kind of seeing what it was all about and just happened to get involved. And actually this person's had a significant impact on the charity, but they were just so matter of fact about their involvement, which was just so endearing.
A friend of mine rang up and said, would I help get a house ready for a Cheshire home? I had no idea what a Cheshire home was, in fact very ignorant, except that of course I remembered Leonard Cheshire. I was to bring an apron and a dustpan and brush and a few old dusters. So we set about it, and gradually it took shape.
It really gives a picture of how charities operate on the ground level. I get the impression that Leonard was the ideas person and he just was a bit of an opportunist. And then actually when you dig deeper into the archive, you see this whole other group of people that were the details people that were getting stuff done on the ground. So when you put those things together, you really get a big picture of what was happening in the charity and how things happened.
There was a man who became a friend of Leonard, and the interviewer asked him, well, what are your thoughts of Leonard as a person? And he said he could quite easily charm the wallpaper off the wall. And I thought that was a brilliant way of describing Leonard, because it's quite true. It's not all been typing and hard work, there has been some fun.
At this point in the project, we've had about over 800 hours of volunteering, which is brilliant, and we've almost transcribed over 200 of the tapes, so we're almost there in terms of reaching our target. And we've had great contributions in terms of our podcast as well. I think the best part of it is allowing volunteers to contribute their own say.
I thought it was really important that I took part in the podcast as part of my volunteering, because I was so excited by what I'd listened to and some of the recordings that I'd found.
The first ever transcription I did was titled Leonard Cheshire Speaks on the Nuclear Deterrent and His Experience of Being an Observer at Nagasaki. Now, up until this point, I had no idea about the contents of the recordings in the archive, let alone that I would be listening to a frank retelling of the moment an atom bomb was dropped. So you could say I was fascinated by the project from day one.
It all leads back to Leonard Cheshire, and we can reanimate that link with him by listening to these tapes.
I think if I had to say one thing about projects in terms of looking towards the future. It's given some assurance and confirmation, because you look back at and listen to what the founder said. The charity's still doing the work to accomplish the goal that Leonard put out when he founded the charity back in 1948.
Sometimes we think, well, we haven't come very far. We have come down a massive highway to where we are today, but that doesn't mean to say we should stop.
The Leonard Cheshire Archive was established in 1985 by the charity's founder. It is home to almost 7,000 items, including 500 audio recordings. Thanks to the generous support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the Foyle Foundation, staff and volunteers have been able to digitise and make accessible over 200 of these recordings. To find out more, visit rewind.leonardcheshire.org.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I don't know if you're saying a few more words.
Oh no, I was just going to say thank you. Thank you for watching the film. And if you do have any questions about anything that you've just seen or listened to me say, then please do pop them in the chat. Always happy to answer questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. I thought that was really interesting, both hearing about the non-linearness of how these things work and how you make impact, and then also getting to see some archive material. Very much enjoyed the film. So we're going to head into our first breakout room, and you're welcome to discuss what you'd like, but I will also pop into the chat a prompt question, which is, what is one thing you do to align your goals with those of your organisation? And we will be coming back at 2:50, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning, so you should be getting an... Okay, I think we've got everyone back now. Apologies for the 2 minutes to come back instead of 1. I hope you had a chance for some interesting conversations, and we are now going to head for our third speakers, Alison Foster and Marcella Bontron, who are from the Sainsbury Archive. I'll hand over to them.
Hello. So I'm Alison, and I am the archivist, and I'm here to talk to you with my colleague Marcella, who's the archive coordinator. And we thought the best thing we could do to talk about managing impact that the archives had on the company is to highlight the project that we've had been working on in the last sort of 6 years, which is of the anniversary of the 150th anniversary celebrations of the start of Sainsbury's. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the activities the archive did, and then Marcella's going to talk about all of the company's activities and customer focused things that went on. And then I will tell you about the benefits, and then how this is aligned to the archive and company's core values. So much like The Guardian, we have a slightly odd setup, although I have yet to meet an archivist that's gone, yeah, the setup of my archive's totally normal. So we are also a charity. We were set up in 2003, but we are an independent charity entirely, which means we have a separate board of trustees, and the archive is actually based at the Museum of London Docklands. So I'm employed by the Museum of London, which, as everyone asks, mean I don't get a discount at Sainsbury's. But we have senior Sainsbury's staff on our board, we have ex-Sainsbury's members of staff, we have family members, Sainsbury's family members, and we have independent advisors all on our board. So in a nutshell, the archive looks after the public-facing side of the archive, and the archive coordinator, who is Marcella, manages the internal aspects and activities that goes on that use the archive. Obviously, we work very close together. I think I talk to Marcella every single day, and including weekends. And it does also mean that, like The Guardian, we have two very different masters, as it were, and we have to match both of their match both of their aims and objectives. So the 150th anniversary took place in 2019, and there were two different strands. The archive was very much involved in the digitization and website project, and then Marcella will talk about all the company activity, as I said. So when I first joined the archive back in 5 years ago, planning for this was well underway, but it was definitely an objective of both the company and the archive, who wanted a brand new all singing, all dancing website, because originally there were 4 different strands. So we had an online catalogue, a microsite from the Museum of London, which had all of our educational resources. We had digitised staff magazines, and we had pages on the Sainsbury's own website. And we thought, let's bring all of this together in a brand new, very easy to use website. So the aims were to create a very easy to use, it had to be very accessible, user-friendly, and it had to have the ability for users to add their own content. So we've got a memory section of our website where people can add the memories of working at Sainsbury's, because this was really important to both the company and the trustees, that we acknowledge the very important role that members of staff had played developing the company into the what it is today. We also saw it as both a company and archive saw it as supposed to promote the important role that the company has played over UK retail. And it also was a place that we could promote all of the archive's educational resources that were provided and had been created before in the archive. So the company managed and paid for the website, and then it was formally given to the archive, but it meant that we had all of the framework was already provided by the company, and that was really, really useful for us. So the website, if none of you have been on there, there's the address at the top. If you can't be bothered writing that down, just type the word Sainsbury Archive into Google and it'll come up. It was launched in 2019, just ahead of the company's public celebrations in May. We currently have 48,500 items online because something happened last year, which meant that we couldn't get into the building. So we are slightly delayed with our digitization, but we are hoping by the end of this year to have about 90,000 images digitized online. As part of this project, we also did digitized and catalogued 1,700 videos, which we are hoping to get up online. Not all of them, because there's a lot of copyright restraints, but hopefully we'll get some of these published. And this website over the last year has had 230,000 unique visitors who've looked at about 1.3 million pages. So we're quite impressed with the amount that a relatively small business archive has managed to get. I just thought, in comparison, in 2019, we had 17 researchers come in and look at the material. We gave presentations for about 1,300 people, and we had 63,000 people visit the exhibition at Museum of London Docklands. So it's a massive jump in the amount of people that are engaging with our material. Obviously, this is the main benefit from having this website. It's a single user-friendly website. It draws together all the existing digitized material and all the newly digitized material. It is accessible anywhere, anytime. It has massively increased visitor figures, which has obviously massively increased knowledge of the archive. It's created an excellent and closer working relationship with the company, because we were very separate beforehand, but now we're really quite close together. And the digitized materials really allowed us to utilize our social media pages, and this has increased our use of new visits from users outside of the typical user of archives. So we've got a lot of art and design fans because our packaging material is so brilliant, and we also have a lot of classic car fans because we have a lot of photographs of car parks which are now online. And this, basically, the archive has its own separate objectives. So this is the objective of the Sainsbury Archive, and obviously this project fit right into the displaying items and documents relating to the history of Sainsbury's, so it was a big tick. But also because we've managed to increase all of the profile of the archive, we've increased all of our collection of material, because so many people now know that we exist and are accepting items. So I think that is my time up. So I'll hand over to Marcella to talk about the company's activities.
Thank you very much, Alison. Let me just put up my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that. So thank you very much for having me today as part of your presentations on demonstrating impact in the archive. So as Alison kind of said, she introduce and explain the very peculiar setup of the archive, which basically means that there are two different strands to the archive, the public facing and the company facing side of things. And I obviously work for Sainsbury's in kind of archive coordinator capacity, kind of bridging the gap between the two. And obviously working very closely on the digitization project on the website, anything and everything that we kind of do, we do now together. And obviously we've decided, Alison, that it would be really nice to kind of bring the whole project and the impact that archive and the website and digitization had with the example of 150th anniversary celebrations that we had in 2019. So we've launched integrated communications plan. Obviously, we were trying to align both communications from our external and internal comms, and our main aims were for the celebrations and for the anniversary year was to kind of drive colleague engagement, because we have over 160,000 colleagues, and obviously since we've added colleagues that were part of Home Retail Group that we acquired in 2016, we also have colleagues from Argos and Habitat that became part of the group, so it was quite important for us to make them feel part of the celebrations. Another aim was to demonstrate our distinctive values, so by that mean kind of take as much as possible out of the whole, you know, there's not that many companies that actually are 150 years old, so let's build on that heritage. Let's put that message kind of across to our colleagues and customers. Let's make everybody feel proud. And another one is, and the last one is kind of drive brand warmth. And by that we mean kind of making customers and everybody that comes across Sainsbury's and the brand, make them feel nice and fluffy and warm by all of our activities. And obviously, as you'll see in the next couple of slides, the heritage material, but also the digitized material that we have been able to, and lucky enough to digitize before pandemic hit, helped us achieve all of these goals and kind of even exceed them. I have to say that it's been incredibly, it's been great fun working on it, at times stressful because of kind of time constraints and kind of having different stakeholders and everybody changing your plans last minute, but we kind of feel very proud of what we have achieved. So one of the first examples of how we incorporated the digitized material, but also the heritage material and our history across the celebrations, was to launch immersive and interactive experience, which was based on our Drury Lane shop for 1 week in Covent Garden. We basically recreated a shop. We had a couple of sections in there that were representing Sainsbury's in the early days, then during the invent of self-service and, let's say, shops like Croydon in 1950s, and then later on. We've obviously went through loads of information and photography from the archive and materials generally to be able to provide to agencies that we were working with examples of the type of products that were available at the time, so they could then recreate the shop. They could inform the actors that were basically interacting with people that were coming through the experience. They were able to kind of engage with them as shop assistants and butchers and cheesemongers and stuff like that. So to make it even more kind of realistic and bringing it to life. And obviously all of that material, some of the kind of reproduction packaging then became part of the archive, so we can then use it, you know, as part of the events, which is great. Then another part of the experience was something that we've worked very tirelessly on. It's kind of like more archive and museum space. Alongside of the walls, we had a timeline graphic that basically highlighted milestones from Sainsbury's history from the early days in 1869 to 2019. And again, we kind of concentrated on pulling the moments that were kind of representative of what the company went through at different times in its history. So it could be the first store in Drury Lane, when we done introduction of self-service in 1950. When did we have first computer? When did we introduce organic foods? Some of our kind of more famous brands. When did we start employing women? When did we start working with let's say, some of our stakeholders and partners such as Comic Relief or Royal British Legion? So we were kind of trying to pick the moments and milestones that were kind of representative of Sainsbury's and what we stand for, and our values stand for. Another display that was part of this exhibition space was all about JS Journal, which is Sainsbury's staff magazine that's been in circulations since 1946. And obviously, because it's been around and available to our colleagues for such a long period of time, it really became kind of iconic in terms of its content, but also some of the photography. So lots of people that are kind of researching social history, we quite often point them to the journal because it's like a time capsule for a certain period of, in JS's history. And we also like the visual side of some of its covers. So we basically created a wall that had a couple of these journals and their covers from certain years, again, kind of carefully curated and picked. So just to show people, what we went through, what was UK going through at a certain period of time. Then, as Alison mentioned, the archive has huge amounts of amazing and iconic packaging and kind of design material. And again, we tried to recognize that fact that Sainsbury's had its own kind of design studio that produced quite a lot of its own label material and packaging in 1960s and 70s. So again, we kind of thought, let's kind of bring all of this visual material, bring more to life and show this to people. And we basically created like a feature wall with real shopping trolley with reproduction kind of material from Sainsbury's packaging studio from those times. So these are not the actual items that we have in the archive. These are just all reproductions, just to assure everybody. What was but the fourth thing that we actually did display some of the archive material that you can see on the fourth picture. And again, we were trying to bring to life and showcase to people, this is the type of material that the archive is looking after. So again, we were trying to showcase material from various aspects of our history. There's material that represents our recruitment and the kind of employment policies and kind of literature, which is quite interesting. Technology and innovations. Then we had, you can maybe see a little bit of a suitcase in the middle of that display case, which was then donated to the archive by somebody that was a child of ex-Sainsbury's employee that used to work for us for 40 years and amassed quite a lot of really interesting and quirky material associated with his time at Sainsbury's. So there's photographs, there's trophies from kind of dart tournaments, employee books, and kind of lots of really nice photography. We also used to do dinners for colleagues that were kind of, we call it long service colleagues that used to be with the company for over 25 years. And this gentleman obviously attended, I think, at least once, and he kind of kept quite a lot of memorabilia from that time. So it was, again, really nice to kind of show people that came through the door of the experience that the breadth and depth of what the archive holds is really amazing. And just, we were trying to basically tell to especially colleagues, think about the archive and think about what you're working on now. Some of the projects that it's, in 5 years time, 10 years time, people will be asking for that. And it will be, again, it could form a part of a display in a museum or something like that. We also displayed what we believe to be the first key to the first Drury Lane shop as part of the exhibition, which always obviously people were always just checking, is it really the key? But that's what we believe, that's what we've been told by JD Sainsbury, that's what it is. As part of the Drury Lane shop, we've invited the Queen, and she kindly accepted. So that was a massive highlight of that entire week. It was a massive highlight because we were fully aware of the fact that our main competitor, Sainsbury's, Tesco, is also celebrating 100th anniversary, and I think British Airways were kind of doing anniversary celebrations roughly at the same time. So we were kind of competing for the same kind of space in terms of media and marketing and all of that. So it was really nice that we've been able to kind of showcase all the kind of great work that has gone into creating this experience, and we actually kind of managed to get something out of it in terms of the visit and the coverage. The Queen has obviously met members of kind of Sainsbury's CEO stakeholders, but also colleagues from Sainsbury's that have contributed in their communities during 2019 or well before. So that's been quite nice for them to have this opportunity to meet her. This was a great thing to kind of be part of and to work on. So in 2019, in May, in kind of anniversary week, we call it, we also launched a TV ad for the anniversary that had quite an amazing amount of kind of reproduction archive material around it. So again, we provided a lot of information to our marketing and agency teams in order for them to be kind of come up with the concept for the ad, which was basically the centerpiece was anniversary cake, which has kind of 5 tiers, and each of those tiers was based on a moment of Sainsbury's history. So you could see at the bottom there was Mary Ann and John James Sainsbury kind of opening up the first store. Then the second one is all about obviously during the First World War, a lot of other male employees went to fight in the war, so we were kind of left without the male workforce, but then we redeployed them after the First World War, so that's kind of nodding, giving a nod to that a part of our history. Then we recognize the fact that Sainsbury's has been kind of really helpful and instrumental in kind of their communities that they serve in, so again, we kind of pull out some of those moments. Then you could see some of the bit more fun activities that our colleagues have been involved in as part of fundraising for Comic Relief. So some colleagues bathed in baked beans, and some were running with kind of chicken masks and stuff like that. So again, we were kind of trying to pull out things that were fun, part of our history. It was great to be kind of a part of this, and colleagues and customers really, or viewers really liked the ad because it was playing on that heritage side of our company. You know, many people didn't realize that we have been, or the Sainsbury's has been around for such a long period of time, and the sense of nostalgia that it gave to people was really positively kind of received. We get lots of kind of feedback from colleagues and customers that are basically saying they remember certain moments, they remember shopping with their mums in some of the Sainsbury's stores, and they were telling us about some of the changes that they went through or they remember. So it was just great moment in time. These are just, apologies for orange, but these are just some of the examples of other kind of activities that we did around the anniversary year or anniversary week. We were giving people 150 points on their Nectar cards. We were giving people birthday cakes. Some of our direct marketing or kind of email that went to customers were peppered with facts from our history, with imagery from the archive, again, kind of acknowledging we have 150 years of our history and heritage to be proud of. So again, that was really well received, and we kind of liked kind of the link between that kind of careful compromise and combination of the old and present, and how, you know, it all came together. Our values of kind of fresh food and affordable prices, and it was very well received. And the other half of this slide is all about what we did during the celebrations for our colleagues. So in terms of kind of the PR marketing activity, we kind of picked a week in May when we did majority of this activity, because we knew that we can't kind of drag it along for a whole year. or anything like it. But in terms of our colleague engagement and what we were doing internally, there was a year full of activities from the beginning of 2019, when we launched a dedicated part of our intranet, Yammer pages. For the 150th, we were asking colleagues to give us their ideas for how they would celebrate the 150th anniversary. We've given each colleague a day for volunteering in their community, and they were also able to kind of submit their ideas for how to volunteer, because we recognize the fact that they know their communities best and what's needed and what could be great kind of cause to be part of. So we received over 2,000 kind of volunteering pledges from colleagues, and then obviously colleagues were given time off to do them in those communities. We also did kind of heritage looking issue of JS Journal. So the first issue was pretty much like the orange one that you can see on the screen, only blue stripes. So we kind of obviously wanted to give note to the first issue of Journal, and we wanted to make it very special. We also given every single colleague issue of the journal. We gave them tote bags, which had some of the milestones from our history on them. They all received anniversary badge. They received biscuits and tea and biscuit kind of packs. That was part of our kind of drive to make them all feel happy and enthusiastic about the anniversary. And then they got a really nice birthday card. So it was amazing. And obviously some of the colleagues were part of also the TV ad that got filmed obviously much earlier on, but it was quite nice for colleagues to be seeing real colleagues in the actual anniversary ad. So that was very well received. And this is just an example of some of the coverage that we have received. As you would imagine, Queen basically rocked. And despite that, we actually did quite a lot of other activities. We had a horse and cart stand that was happening during the same week, delivering kind of online groceries to customers, which looked amazing. Obviously, it was all based on the photography from the archive, but it didn't receive not even as much coverage as the Queen did. But that's just understandable, and we are very pleased with all the work that went in. It kind of made it all worthwhile. And we ended the year on a high note with the Christmas ad. Obviously, we kind of recognize the fact that it's a big thing for all retailers. There's always a big competition, whose ad is kind of best. But we wanted to again give a note to our heritage. So Nicholas the Sweep Christmas ad for 2019 was all based on kind of filmed in a location with the sets that was based off other earlier stores with displays. People were dressed in costumes that were relevant to that time period. We also did, so we kind of had that right amount of stuff that is necessary for any Christmas ad, heartbreak, emotions, a bit of fun, cheekiness, injustice, and just kind of right amount of everything. Very well received. And I particularly like the Metro wraparound that we did around the ad. So again, that was just a special kind of edition of Metro that had kind of brought Sainsbury's from 1869 to customers in kind of London and wherever the Metro gets distributed in. So that was quite fun, kind of fun take on the ad and kind of bringing it to people a bit more closer. Apparently the ad was second most popular Christmas ad on YouTube that year. So we'll take that. So all of the information about, what was it like kind of in those times, what would the shop look like, what would the display look like, it's all kind of worthwhile. And we did tell them that the mandarins and oranges were not available in 1869, but obviously a certain amount of creative license was applied, as it is with these things. So it's when we were working on the celebrations and kind of providing the material and information, we kind of realized very early on that quite a lot of people from kind of marketing and PR and agencies, they are not aware of how archives are structured, how do they work. It was quite often we basically said we will give you the facts, and then you, based on that, you can come up with your ideas for what you want to do in terms of your activity. I almost felt at times that they want to retrofit the history, you know, kind of let's make oranges appear in 1869 just because we like that idea. But that's just how it is, you know. But
Marcella, sorry, we're running a bit over time. If
that's pretty much the last slide. The last one is that we're continuing to kind of utilize the digitized material and everything that we have at the archive. So we are kind of promoting it through company's Yammer page, our newsletters. I do lots of webinars and presentations internally on history of advertising or history of Sainsbury's. So just let me know if anyone is interested in finding out how did we put all of this together, or any specific questions about the anniversary and some of the activities. Just let me know. I'll be here for the Q&As as well. So thank you very much for having me.
Georgie. So the first question we have had is from Megan, and I've just lost the question typically. And she asks, what do you feel is the most effective way to measure the impact you are having and demonstrating your value? Silence.
Oh, we've all gone quiet. I thought I'll just jump in and say what we've done. So obviously, with the projects we've done, it has an evaluation component. It's required by the funder. So we have an external. We've had an external evaluator. Sorry, mouth and brain aren't attached in this heat. We've had an external evaluator do an evaluation report for us. So to measure that impact, the most effective thing that was done for that was actually speaking to people, so surveying people, and processing those to show how what personal impact you've had. Perhaps the easier way, or a way that you would have more control over, is by using free social media analytics. Like if you are on Facebook or Twitter, there are analytics panels that you can learn about quite quickly and easily. There's quite a few tutorials online. I think that's always a good way of showing how many people are looking at what you're doing online. The same goes for Google Analytics if you have a website. And also if you've got Calm or some other online catalogue, there are ways of getting views for that, and it's collecting them and actually telling people about them.
Thank you. I noticed that in the first presentation, Philippa mentioned using the Guardian's own. I can't remember now what it was called, but it was some kind of statistical thing that she could measure the impact of her project. So I suppose it's also about thinking about what mechanisms you already have in place within your organisations.
I might add to that. So we are kind of piggybacking on kind of Sainsbury's Google Analytics kind of platform. So we are getting a bit more than you would kind of get as part of the free sets. So we are able to kind of measure, ever since we launched the website in 2018, we are able to kind of measure the views and kind of demonstrate to our trustees and the company the level of impact the website and the digitization had for our colleagues and customers. But also obviously not just in the anniversary year, but generally we are very keen on kind of make colleagues feel kind of proud of who they work for. So kind of the engagement that we had during that year, where colleagues were participating in activities, that were creating kind of albums that will form part of the archive in the future, and kind of make them feel excited, engaged, proud of our heritage and the values that we as a retailer kind of stand for. That was one of the ways that we've kind of measured the impact, you know, how kind of colleagues and customers felt about it. And obviously then we had quite a lot of information from our agencies and relevant kind of departments that were measuring the impact of what the press coverage had. Generally, we knew kind of how our TV ads performed. So kind of being kind of associated maybe with the bigger company or organization does make some of these things easier. I think that also what it makes easier when your kind of aims are aligned. So both the archive as a charity and us as a company, we knew early on, as early as 2016, that we want to do digitization and we want to do the websites, and we recognize the fact that there's 150 years. So even though that we didn't have at that time all of the plans ready, we knew that in order to fulfill some of the dreams and some of the ideas, we need to have digitized material. We can't kind of answer queries. We can't kind of showcase to journalists and media, this is what we're talking about, you know, or kind of working from the head office and having the archive in a different location. So yeah, there's real kind of amalgamation of how we measured the impact.
Thank you, that's really interesting. We've also had a good question from Tina, which is, all of the projects seemed amazing at raising the profile of the archives internally. Has this had a longer lasting effect on interacting with the wider organisation?
I would definitely say so. For example, from my experience, because when we started, there were lots of colleagues from different departments that are not based in London, let's say, or locations that are based in different UK locations, or store colleagues that didn't know that we have an archive. It's not uncommon for people to, that this is kind of a revelation, but also for the customers, and they loved all of the fun activities and all of the kind of things that we did in store and in kind of head offices, and it raised our profile amazingly. I mean, everybody became so proud when you kind of showcase the website, you know, this is all the material that we have now, and there's more added every couple of months. They just did never kind of realize that we have all of this kind of this breadth of material available. So, and that kind of lasts. Now I kind of don't have to do the selling pitch anymore. Before I had to kind of start, you know, this is who I am, this is what we are working on, we need your help or cooperation. And these days everybody kind of know of the Sainsbury archive. So if I need help with kind of record management side of things, it's much easier to kind of persuade people. I said easier, it's still hard because we are a massive organization, but and things change on a weekly basis, but it's much easier to kind of leverage and get kind of information or material out of people and departments than it was kind of before we had this activity happening.
Thank you. Sorry, was someone going to talk then?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I talked about this a bit in my presentation. I skimmed over it. I think like a general answer to has it had a longer lasting effect on interacting with the wider organisation is yes. However, in my experience, it tends to fluctuate depending on what's going on in the charity. And at first I found that a little bit disconcerting, but I actually think it's quite normal. You've just got to not be discouraged by it, because charities change and evolve, people leave, well, any organisation does. You can't really rest on your laurels and think everybody's just going to seek you out. So yeah, that's just my contribution to that one.
And because we're a bit tight on time, I'm actually going to go to one of the questions that somebody's asked later on, which is kind of the flip side of this. So, where do you begin if you've never done this before, and where do you begin with this type of impact work? Do you have any top tips?
I would say,
what's the one thing you do?
Yeah, I'd look at the strategy. I'd look at your organisation strategy and be like, okay, we want to make an impact, because you can usually see, you think, oh well, we could do this, we could do that. But look at your organisation strategy, and then start making friends in your organisation with people who are influential with that strategy, and take it from there. So it should naturally develop, hopefully.
I should say also for us, it was really useful. Obviously, the timing was really useful. If you have any anniversaries, that sort of thing coming up, that's a great way to piggyback onto things, because that's the way that you can go, look at your history. We want to celebrate it because we've reached X milestone. And I think every business archive knows that that's the time that you get the money to do projects. So shout about that sort of thing.
I'd maybe add to that, as well as looking at sort of what your organisation wants to achieve, looking at how they work and how you can fit in with their sort of work processes and workflows. Because we've for years sort of shouting about how we've got these amazing photographic collections and why does nobody ever want to use them, and why are people using, you know, images from Getty when they could be getting them for free and much better from us. And I think the problem was that we were digitizing for people and then passing them the scans and leaving them to process them. And as soon as we started looking at what their photo system is and putting stuff in for ourselves so that it was just there in the format that they needed it with the metadata that they needed it, suddenly it was usage massively went up. So I think it's just making things as convenient as possible, because like as Stephanie says, people won't always seek you out and they won't think to ask, but if you can put stuff in front of them and then tag it in some way so that they know it came from you and you can monitor the usage, that seems to work much better.
Really good suggestions, thanks very much. We've probably got time for just one last question, and it's from Lorna, and she's asked if you had any difficulties balancing any negative aspects of your history that may have been uncovered during these impact projects. How have you managed them?
Probably a little bit too early to say for us. But we, during our oral history project looking at diversity, there's definitely some less positive stories in there, and we were sort of specifically asking people, you know, was your career more difficult because you're a person of colour? What made it hard for you to get into the media? And I think that's where it's a massive advantage that we have this slight split and we come under the charity. We don't need to see ourselves as like a marketing facet, and we don't always have to be positive all the time. And you know, we work for an organisation that does pride itself in honesty and transparency, but at the same time you want to keep getting records from people, you want to have organizational trust, so it is a bit of a balance, I think. We haven't really solved that problem yet, but yeah.
I would agree with what Philippa said. I mean, we've had two quite large oral history projects now, and I don't think we actually have uncovered any negative aspects. I'm not sure what they mean by negative aspects, because if you're talking to people about their lives, or you've got the history of an organisation, there's always positive and negative. So I think, yeah, I would say in my case, no pressure to kind of censor or to soften any negative stories at all. In fact, sometimes the negative, to put quotes around it, can actually be a really interesting story. So, I mean, obviously you have obligations if you're going to go forward and you're looking at things that have safeguarding and things involved, then you have different obligations then. And then you follow your organisation's procedure. But in actual practice, we've not come across anything like that. I don't know if Lorna had any particular thing in mind. Might be something to talk about off the webinar.
I think I would concur with Philippa that it's quite important to be honest and kind of transparent, that nobody's pretending that we know every single page, every single material in our collection, and that we read every single word. So we can't kind of guarantee that there's not something that could upset people, but we're kind of fully aware of the fact that that could be something upsetting, and just be upfront about it and kind of display it as part of the history. It's not something that we endorse kind of these days, but I think, yeah, any kind of, I always kind of look around kind of wider sector. I think that any organization that kind of does censor itself, I think it kind of goes against it, you know, at some point. So I don't think that it really makes sense. I think that for any kind of museum heritage archive organization, especially with the debate around colonialism and all of these things around in museums, it's really important to be transparent and kind of acknowledge the fact that these are records from the past. It's not something that either of us, you know, said yesterday. It's a record of the past.
I would just jump in and say, actually, we find the opposite in our job. I'm sure Marcelo agrees, that there's absolutely no pressure to soften these. In fact, the pressure is more to be more honest and open about.
Yeah.
Be aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks everyone, that's been really, really interesting. Sorry to cut off the discussion, but we are tight for time.
This is the end, in the sense that thank you all so much for coming. It's been great to have your questions, to see the discussions, particularly enormous thanks to our speakers. I feel like we've covered such a range of projects. It's been really, really, really great. And a note to people attending, we will be sending an evaluation form around shortly. If you could fill it in, that would be great. This is a series of events and we do take your feedback into account. The last thing to say is we are planning to do a soft close, so some of us will be on the line till 4. If you were just cut off and would like to continue chatting, please do stay on the line, but if you also want to go and get an iced beverage, I won't blame you. So thank you very much everyone.